Hi everyone, this is Victoria from the SA Media Group's Future Soldier Technology Conference. This year's conference will be taking place in London between the 9th and 11th of March. And today I'm delighted to be joined by our conference chair, Major General Christopher Barry, the former Director for Land Warfare in the British Army. Major General, it's a pleasure to have you here today. And tell me, why don't we start with what are you up to today?
Thanks, Victoria. That's really kind of you to connect. I'm actually down in Cornwall. As you know, I'm in the process of exiting the British Army at the end of a full career. The last 4 years having been the principal training officer. And before that, I was the commander of collective training group and then the founder of chief of staff of the Land Warfare Centre. So I kind of unusually have spent an awful lot of time in training and force development. And consequently, I thought I'd better write down everything I'd learned in that time. And I thought I'd write down my thoughts on how you train in the 21st century. So I'm just writing a little book at the moment, which I'm going to give to the British Army on this subject, which sort of connects pretty well with the conference, because it's a fascinating time. And, you know, we're in a 21st century and we need 21st century solutions to its problems. And that in of itself is a challenge, because obviously we're building on a brownfield site that was built in the 20th century. But it's a challenge we can rise to. Totally confident about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually remember you mentioning how key training is, especially in the modern battlefield, where, you know, there are so many emerging technologies, but it's important that the dismounted soldier knows how to use all of those technologies. So that brings me on to the next question, which is, what perspective will you be bringing to the conference?
So, I mean, you're quite right, Victoria, because since David met Goliath, a better trained opponent has beaten a bigger, more well-armored or better equipped one. And training is the lifeblood, really. It's the thing that makes kit into capability. And so all of this new ideas, all of this new technology, we've got to think, how do we onboard it, and how do we onboard it in a way that makes it all work together? And it isn't just a kind of human activity anymore. There are increasingly machines that will assist on the battlefield and may one day even take over, and they need to be trained as well. You know, that we have to think now about how we're going to train those processes, those algorithms, those large language models, such that they give us the advantage, well, within our rules of engagement. I mean, that is an interesting conundrum of its own. But, you know, so I suppose my perspective has really been coming from my experience with the British Army. In the last 4 years, I've trained everything in the British Army twice. I've seen pretty much all of it in the field and elsewhere. I've been privileged to have that very, very visceral connection between soldiers and the equipment they're onboarding. And of course, we've done an awful lot of work with our allies and partners around the world, including the Ukrainian army, right on the front line of the 21st century battle as it is displayed right now. Not that it will necessarily remain that way, but that is a vital understanding and perspective that will allow us to meet this challenge and get it right.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess, you know, that's why it's such a pleasure to have you on board to chair this conference. I think you know, your breadth of experience is going to be really useful for, you know, the conference itself. So what would you say are some of the main areas of focus for the soldier, for soldier modernization and for the dismounted soldier at the moment?
So the thing for the dismounted soldier, if we're going to kind of zero in on that particular sector, you know, the essential constant challenge is equipping the soldier with the ability to prosecute the maximum amount of lethality and suppression and situational awareness without overburdening her or him. That there is a finite amount to how much a soldier can carry, and that there is a finite amount how much they can process. And so finding ways to help them process that information, and then finding ways on how they're able to, or working out what the limit is to that, are two really important to the paradigm of how you improve their lethality. And then we've got to think, you know, is that challenge met best by supporting them from afar with all the risk of the connectivity that you'll need to maintain in order to do that? Or is it best done by equipping them to be able to prosecute that lethality themselves? And if it's the latter, then we need to think about how we skill and prepare a soldier to do that. And that goes way beyond the ability just to use the kit, but it's on the ability to understand the rules of engagement, the law of armed conflict, and to be morally comfortable with the prosecution of unrivaled lethality.
In your view, what are some of the examples of some of the most interesting and emerging technologies to enhance soldier resilience, situational awareness, and overmatch in an evolving battlefield?
So you have to take inspiration from the Ukrainian army here. You know, here they have some extraordinary examples of how individual soldiers and small teams are able to repel much larger groups of adversaries for really long periods of time. So part of that story is about the clever use of technology, but part of that story is just a constant of warfare, which is their human ability to resist, to survive, to continue to fight month after month, day after day, attack after attack. That is extraordinary. That is that indefinable quality of the moral component of fighting power. And in all of our thinking, we mustn't lose that we have to build that. That isn't found. That is built. And to me, that is the most. I guess those two elements are the most important aspect of that. But we must also kind of draw inspiration from elsewhere. The bottom line is we don't want our soldiers to have to do that. You know, we would much rather win that battle before the frontline infantry are engaging themselves. And so when we think about dismantled social lethality, we've also got to think about how they contribute to that any network, to that unfair fight that CGS talks about. And there's no point in making brilliant tactical operators if the battle's going to be won at the operational or indeed the strategic level.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess that brings me on to the next question, which is probably around collaboration. Why do you think it's important to keep the dismounted soldier community connected through this conference?
Well, it's never been more important because this is the era of accelerated human growth. So in the 20th century, then it was possible to recapitalize a tank every 10, 20, 30 years. But in the 21st century, you know, it's difficult to think that you will be able to do that. And if you consider just the simple example of the first person view drone used in Advika, I think in May of 2023, it has had something like 50 or 60,000 software upgrades since then. So that rate of technological advancement is something that has to be paced, and it can only be done between close collaboration between industry and defence. And you can see defence rising to that challenge with the development of the NAD group, with platforms like Rapstone in the British Army. And many of the contributors to this conference will have views on how that needs to be improved. And that's an important element as well. I mean, this isn't one way. I think there is learning to be had from industry as well as from defence on how we set ourselves up to be able to meet the challenge of the 21st century and indeed meet it better than anybody else in the world.
Great stuff. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate you sharing all these insights with us. And we're very much looking forward to hearing more from you and all of our speakers at this year's Future Soldier Technology Conference. So I guess I'll see you in March. Chris, thank you so much.
Yes, so Victoria, this was the last thing I had to do before getting out on the ocean. So have a great day.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Take care. See you. Bye-bye.